Good evening here in Springwood in Brisbane, Queensland. It's 7 o'clock. It's currently 10 o'clock in New Zealand. They've just gone to daylight saving. And of course, 10 o'clock in the morning for our UK listeners. And my name's Jeff Shaw. And my fellow co-host, top left-hand corner, is Joy, who's organised this incredible evening of how to live off the grid. And in the top right-hand corner is Joy Foley, and I'd like to hand it over to my good mate Julia to carry on with the show. Good evening.
Hello, dear listeners. Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today on the news, the United Nations Secretary General announced that we have to stop waging war on nature. Those are the words he used. And my mother and other seniors have spent the last 2 months putting together presentations and exhibits on how we have to love nature. And the young ones many of them are going plastic free and vegan in order to basically make a change. So we're delighted to, in that vein, have Joy Foley join us today. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Quite exciting.
And Joy, for those of you that are just tuning in now and haven't seen our promotion, Joy Foley is experienced in living off the grid. This is a picture of her with a black umbrella, a child on the back, and a cattle dog about to walk all the way to the shops in the UK. So this was your time when you were living off the grid in the UK, Joy, is that right?
That's right, yeah. We were there for about 12 years and we renovated an old house in the middle of nowhere up a mountain. Well, it's a small hill really because you don't have big mountains in the UK, Ingleborough. And so, yeah, it was a 3-kilometre walk to the village to do the shopping. And that's the house that we were working on. That's when we were working on it. The walls around the dry stone walling. So that was one of the skills that we learned while we're there. And yeah, it was quite a fun time. We had a windmill up on the mountain. We created a vegetable garden. We actually had to pull bedrock out of the ground to build up soil to grow vegetables, but then we did really well. Short growing season though in the UK compared to here. About 3 months. So you've got to make full use of clutches and keeping things warm at both ends of the season.
So it sounds a bit like, it looks a bit like Findhorn. It looks like cold and pretty damp and wet. What was it that motivated you and your partner to do this?
Well, it was when we were going out. I wasn't actually planning on staying in the UK, and we were going out together. And he was planning on moving from London up to the Lake District. And in the course of looking for property, we found this one snowy February morning in the mist, and we had to walk up the mountain to find the house, and we both fell in love with it. And then it was about then that we decided that we would marry, in fact, because it was a project not for one person, but really for two. And yeah, so that house was the beginning of our 28-year marriage, effectively. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. Did you have any farming experience before that? It sort of feels like you sort of bought the house and you know, became a farming partner.
Yeah, so I grew up on a farm in New Zealand. My family, both sides of my family, were from high country sheep stations in New Zealand. And I grew up on a small 28-acre farm, a dairy farm. So I grew up milking cows and carrying hay. And but my girl's dad is a Londoner, and so for him it was all very new. But for me, the country life was quite where I was at home, much more at home than in the city. Yeah.
And before you sort of fell in love with that place in Scotland, up in that North Country, what were you doing before that, between New Zealand and living off the grid?
Yeah, I was quite young then. I had done my nursing training in Dunedin in New Zealand, and I was working as a nurse, pediatrics, urology, and then I did a bit of work in a chemist, a pharmacy for a while, and then went travelling. And I was actually planning on going to Great Ormond Street and doing my pediatric training there, but I met my partner, fell in love, and had my own kids instead. So I learned firsthand raising my children, how to look after kids.
Yeah, it's a different journey, isn't it? Yes, Great Ormond Street is pretty famous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've moved on quite, you're a member of many organizations now, and you're quite proactive in terms of working here in Australia with the local Indigenous elders and you formed a group for women healing the earth and learning from the Indigenous elders on how to do that. But between Australia and the UK, I understand you also picked up some permaculture and cooperative skills in Germany itself. Is that right?
Yeah, so we were in the UK for 12 years and living off grid with all of what that entails. And then we went to Germany and renovated a house over there. The children went through the German school system, so they were still little when we moved. And we were living a pretty normal life in the system, in our system that we're now trying to extricate ourselves from, if you like. And towards the end of my time in Germany, we all shifted and changed. The children grew up. My partner and I sort of drifted apart, and so the marriage finished. And I was then like, well, what am I going to do now? And at that point in my life, I didn't really even know who I was really, other than all the roles I'd been playing, mother, chauffeur, cook, gardener, and so on. Nurse. I was working as a nurse over there too, as a district nurse. And so I went through a really radical period of a very rapid transformation, if you like. And part of that did involve Findhorn in Scotland that you mentioned before. I went there and did an eco-village living course. I realised that, I loved the earth, that I'd always had a connection to the earth. I'd always lived on the land and feel very at home on the land. And so I started looking at community as being an option for the future. And I had a couple of things happen. One of them that was a really big key moment in my journey was seeing the photo that Chris Jordan did of a baby albatross chick that had died of eating plastic. And in the moment that I saw that photo, my entire life shifted just in a fraction of a second. So in that moment that I saw that, I realized that I was responsible for the death of that bird, in that everything is totally interconnected. And it was a embodied awareness knowing that just happened. And it was huge. And so I hit grief, and I went through a bit of a process, probably 8 months of really investigating what was going on in the planet. So I started looking at the political systems and the monetary systems, and I started looking at the environment, what was going on. And, it sort of started with the plastic, and then it sort of mushroomed out. And it's like opening Pandora's box. Once you've taken the lid up, you can't close it. And once you know, you can't unknow. So I became very acutely aware that my lifestyle, which I thought had been quite good. I've always grown organic vegetables in the garden for my kids. I've always recycled, been cautious with water and so on. But it's not enough, it's just tokenistic, because the foundation of that lifestyle is based on resource thinking that is why the Earth has been so damaged. So I just went through this huge process of realizing all of that and realizing that if I was going to be authentic, I couldn't do that any longer. So so I basically dropped out. I decided that I wanted to help start a small community, an intentional community, and I didn't want to use plastic anymore. I helped set up a food cooperative in Munich. There was a group of us got together to do that because we couldn't buy, we're vegetarian because that's also part of it. We couldn't buy food, protein, lentils and beans and things without them being wrapped in plastic because of the laws over there. So we worked out how to set up this dry goods food cooperative. Then we started buying from local organic farmers. Half of our group were vegan, the other half were vegetarian. There was very few meat eaters. And yeah, so we did. We started setting up a small community. It was called Our Garden, and that was a play on words because AUER was the name of the little town where we were. That sounds like our in English. And
yeah.
Our, yeah. And then we added the English garden to it to call it Our Garden. So this is just some of what we were doing there. That's drying some herbs. The last one was some of the little punnets that we gave out, and we created a CSA scheme as well. So we developed a food cooperative, we started a community-supported agriculture scheme, and we started the foundation of a community. And we were growing grain by and harvesting by hand, which was great fun and hard work, but very rewarding, using old skills. And
yeah, that's pretty radical. I have to admit, I sort of skipped the sickle thing, thinking it was a bit socialist, but I didn't realize you were growing it by hand. I mean, that's pretty massive. So yeah, that's the kind of things that they did in the olden days. How did you have someone who knew how to wield one of those things? You know, Jeff?
Yeah. So I'd learned actually a little bit about how to use one. The girl's dad had lived in Switzerland for a little while, and he learned how to use a scythe while he was there, and then he taught me. So we used to cut the grass at the bottom of our garden for the guinea pig and the rabbit when the children were little. So I actually learned how to use a scythe way back when. And yeah, but George, he was the one of the co-founders of the community. He had seen his father do it in earnest and had learnt from him. So I was picking up the cut grains and bundling them, and he was doing the main cutting. And we had some other helpers, other woofers that were there helping as well. So other community members. Yeah, the yurt that you just saw, that was my home while I was in Germany at the end, when I'd stepped into this other system, this other way of being. So I was working with gifting then, with reciprocity, and that's what I'm still doing, because I also believe that in order to move forward, we have to shift our attitude towards money and work, and I believe that the way forward is actually taking wisdom from the Indigenous cultures, which is about reciprocity and sharing. So moving away from money.
Yeah, Joy, I mean, it sounds like you've really done your in-depth research, and I might sort of ask you to walk us back through that from the, if we're just growing our garden, vegetables, but still living in this system, that's just token, and we're still contributing to I mean, I think you wrote in your Facebook post, war. So I'm really interested in that link between plastic and conflict. And if you could just take us through some of the things that you said you can't unknow and share them perhaps for us.
Okay. Well, one of the things about the war that happened was the girl's dad was working as a programmer, and he got a contract working for EADS, which is a European aeronautics division or something. Anyway, they were building the Eurofighter effectively. And I remember the moment when I realized that, oh my God, I'm feeding my children blood money. And that was really big. Like So that was a very direct link, but there's lots of other links, you know. Yeah, even like when we had the food co-op in Munich, it was in an old factory that had previously been a lighting factory, I believe. We had our warehouse there, and we brought our CSA food there, and so we were getting refugees from Syria coming into that space, and it was really interesting looking at the dynamic between the people that were living there, that were trying to support the refugees, and that were really proactive. And these were young children, actually. This was they were the ones that had lost their family, and then even the babies were coming. So it was very interesting to be so really in your face, you know, and part of that, and you read what's in the papers, and it doesn't match the reality. The reality is these people are desperate, and they've lost everything, and they're not out to fleece the system, and they're not out to create unrest, you know. So yeah, there's lots of little things. One of the things that was really interesting about living in Germany all that time was realizing that all people are people. All people have hearts and love their families. And because I was working as a district nurse while I was there, a lot of the people that I was looking after were the children, the wartime children. And they were still trying to deal with the trauma of what being a wartime child in Germany was, and it was horror beyond. And I wouldn't even share the stories that they were sharing with me, because they're too horrific to imagine, you know. Perhaps one thing I could share that gives you an idea is these children were sworn to secrecy, in utmost and absolute secrecy, of anything that they had seen or heard that they didn't like, because if they weren't totally secret, their entire family could be murdered, and that was not uncommon. So
yeah. This is the Syrian children that you're talking about, or the German?
Oh, no, this is just going back towards the German citizens that had lived through the Second World War.
Right.
And like I came as a New Zealander thinking that, you know, they'd been the enemies, if you like. And then I learned that there are no enemies. There's just people that are trapped in systems that are run by people that are confused. Yeah.
Yeah. So you sort of you took a stand, and you left the system, and you hopped on a bicycle, went on a vision quest. Is that about right?
Yeah. Well, it's a bit, a long story, but so I was working at the little community in Germany for a while, and then I realized that I was probably going to go somewhere else, but I didn't really know where. And so I decided to just my ordinary bike, a city bike, packed myself up, and I cycled from just north of Munich to Rome. So I went down through Kufstein, Innsbruck, up over the Brenner, which is one of the main passes. That's the map showing the routes up the Brenner. And I, cycled down past Lake Garda, across the Po flatlands, up over the Apennines and down into Toscana. So it was a bit of a journey, and I did that because I had 6 potential projects to do. And they're all, I knew at that point that I was going to be something to do with the Peace Valley, because I got that name in a dream. I knew it was going to be to do with revegetation, but I didn't know where. So it was community, healing the earth, healing our relationships with each other. And that's landing in Rome at the end, at the Vatican. So, I got to within 100 kilometers of Rome when I was just physically, emotionally, psychologically, completely at the end, if you like. I was just exhausted. My knee was swollen, my back was aching, I had no energy left. Probably my electrolytes were all haywire because I hadn't been eating and drinking enough for the amount of exercise I was doing. And I had, I think, what people call, I've learned since, call a breakthrough thing happen. So I just lost it. I was in tears and I didn't know anymore. I didn't even know whether I wanted to go to Rome. I had absolutely no idea. Like, what was I doing this stupid thing for? And then I dropped into a different state of being that I think you could call presence. And for that whole day, I floated mostly in and out of that state. So time shifted in its way of being, colours shifted, my experience of everything around me shifted, and I could, like, my eyes aren't so good, but I could see in intricate detail the patterns on the wings of a butterfly that were 100 yards away, and it seemed to be moving in slow motion. And that was there's an example of what was happening the whole day. And at the end of that day, I think I was opening an email. I'd got to this little town called Toadie, and each time I got to an intersection, I just tossed a coin. Where am I going to go? Just, no agenda at all. But I got to Toadie, and I think I was opening my emails, and something came up, and it was related to Findhorn. There's quite a lot related to Findhorn. It all keeps coming back, pops up again and again. And all of a sudden, I just knew. I knew that I had to come to Australia. I knew it was like a knowing that it wasn't listening to somebody talk to me. It was like just I knew from the depths of my being that I was meant to go to Australia, that it was my sole purpose, that all of what I'd learned in my life so far was going to serve that purpose, and basically to get on with it and stop messing around.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you sort of spent, what, 6 weeks cycling? You've got 6 projects. You're cycling through whole of Europe, and then you have a breakthrough, and you decide, or you know that you've got to go to Australia. Wow.
Yeah,
that's an
so
amazing
it was pretty
story.
Cool. So on that day, I wrote to my brother who lives nearby here in Boona and said, hey, I think I'm going to come and we might just do something together. We might do, because he's got land out in the Cambanora Gorge. And he said, oh, well, maybe you better talk to my friend Susan. And then she wrote back, because remember, we've got a day-night difference here. So I'd send an email and it would arrive, and then they sent an email back. And so within 24 hours, I think, I actually had contact with Bindarabi community, which is where I am at the moment.
Oh.
And so, so I was actually emailing the community from the poolside in Rome. I did actually go the last 100 kilometres, but I was honouring my body. I decided to take the train for that last bit, and finish the journey. And so so then I just packed up and visited my kids. Both my girls are in the UK, visited them, and then within 3 months I was, even less, August, September, no, within 3 months I was in Australia, and 2 months after that I was here at Bindarabi. It was again a process.
That's huge.
But,
yeah. So Jeff's drawn up a picture of the sort of, I think, the plaque that is at Bindarabi community. And Jeff, you've been at this community as well.
I have.
And I don't even know whether you got there before Joy did. Actually, it'd be interesting, because I know you got there before I did. When did you go?
At the first meeting of mines about breaking them up into 2-acre blocks. I think Durn's already sort of done that, and they've put in a road. So we came in for a couple of working bees putting up the toilets and showers in the kitchen area. And we traipsed up the creek to the water source. Yeah, we camped there one Christmas. 5 nights.
So for our international,
Okay.
Yeah. So you stayed there 5 nights?
At one time there, we went Usually go for the weekend, but this was a 5-night one just over the Christmas New Year period. Bloody amazing.
So for our
energy.
it is, isn't it? For our international listeners, Bindarabi community is, I think it's south of Queensland, just over the border. There's some pictures of it. There's a beautiful, beautiful mountain which has amazing spring water, and a geologist discovered it and bought, I think, 300 acres, and then apportioned a part of it to share with community. He and his partner had already set up Kenmore Transition Town, so they were already for years looking at becoming more sustainable on a sort of civilian level, and they then transformed this wild bushland into a local eco community where people can just camp, or then they can just basically come and build in and grow their own food, and try and create a community that lives sustainably and in respect with there's the mountain. It's amazing wherever you are around that property, the mountains there. So Joy, so Bindarabi obviously called you in the dream time, and then did you actually have any money? Because before that you were in Germany in a cooperative and you were working on exchange. How on earth did you manage to get over here? I thought the Australians don't let just anybody come here if they don't have money.
Well, because I'm a New Zealander, I was able to come in and live here. So I don't get, I get support through Medicare, but that's it, as just being a New Zealander that's allowed to reside here. So I had, because of that, I was able to come in. And I did have some money from when our marriage ended, and I invested that in this journey. And that's actually quite interesting, because we go back to Findhorn now as to why this is really key, actually. And I didn't realize it until I was here. So while I was doing the Eco-Village Living course in Findhorn in 2015, a young man from Australia came up to me and gave me a black cockatoo feather. And I just looked at it. At that point, I said, I had no idea I was leaving Germany. I thought I was going to be there forever. And he gave it to me, and I looked at it and I said, well, that's a real honour, my goodness, wow. But I don't even know what a black cockatoo is. And I've got nothing to do with Australia. My brothers live there, but no more than that. And I kept it as this really honoured gift. And then it's quite a fun story. Well, while I was at the course, actually, my father, he passed. And this wasn't the fun bit. This was the very sad bit. And so I wasn't able to get back for the funeral, but they held a memorial service at the end of that year. So I planned to go to that. And in the course of what I was doing, I knew I didn't want to fly much anymore. So you're getting some of the view of the camp there as it, got blown over and then got rebuilt. Anyway, so I ended up, to cut a long story short, at a friend's place. I went to various countries in one flight, because I had to go from Germany to New Zealand to my dad's memorial service. And I thought, rather than doing lots of either never seeing people again, I'd do one flight, but I'd stop at different countries. While I was in Canada, I was sort of pulled to a little stand at, it was an artisan market, and this lady made jewellery. So I kept going to it. It's like, no, I don't want to buy jewellery. Anyway, she said, I'm going to give you a reading. And I said, oh, God, I don't do stuff like that. And so then she said, well, I see that you're going to go to your wild woman soul, and there's a large parrot. So I still didn't know there was a connection at that point between a parrot and a cockatoo. I had no idea. I'd never even looked up what a cockatoo was. And then I did my vision quest. It sent me here. And then I landed at Bindarabi, and we have flocks of black cockatoos that fly around. And another synchronicity brought me to meet Kylie Githerable, who is her totem is the black cockatoo, and coincidentally, she ended up coming here and grounding me to this place, and brought me into custodianship of this particular piece of land here. So the synchronicities were huge. So somebody said to me, you've just been called back, you're supposed to be here. And it's like, well, I'm just following what feels right. And it feels very right. Yeah, very, very right. And I'm so grateful to Kylie. And her mum's been here now. Auntie Gloria's been here. Auntie Sonia's been here. It's beautiful, really beautiful.
That's a really interesting term that you use, the Auntie Kylie grounding you in this land, because obviously a lot of us do feel like, we know that this is not originally our home, and we don't, we're here because of the economics and the system, but it's, we're not the first settlers. And I remember we once went to meeting the Indigenous and learning about their spirituality up near Mount Warning, and one of the young ones greeted us and with one of the elders, and when he said that we welcome you, there was this collective sigh that went through the audience, because I think unconsciously we kind of all knew that we didn't grow up here, so we might have grown here, but we're not the first settlers, so that had been weighing. And when they said, "You're welcome here. This is our home. Our home is your home now," it was just like this huge relief, unconscious, that we'd unconsciously been carrying that burden of being outsiders here. So was that when you said she went through a grounding ceremony? What did that entail? What was the significance of it for her to do that for you?
I think you'd have to ask her that.
Well, she just said, "I'm going to ground you," and you said, "Okay, fine, go ahead."
So, I'd actually just invited her to come to a weaving weekend, and it turned out to be slightly more than that. And she held the most beautiful ceremony. There was quite a small group of people, and she held a smoking ceremony, and had a special message for everybody that was there. It was a very, very profound and deep and beautiful experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Apparently, it was very important, because later I got to know, through the Indigenous burning, I got to know, I was at a workshop when I was up at Maryvale at a Bunya festival, and I got to know Auntie Carly, who is a Gullible elder. And then so when I landed on this ground, I had a sense that there was something special about it. And so I actually invited the elders to come to have a look around and see what they thought. And they realized that this particular part of this land is actually an ancient woman's place, woman's site. Oh. So where I've put my camp, unknowingly, is actually part of this special woman's place. And so it was really important, because of that, to have that special welcome ceremony from Kylie, who's a very important member of the family, because not anybody can live on one of these special sites. You've got to be welcomed. And even at that time, it wasn't conscious that it was important. Do you know what I mean? But it was known. It was really important. So so now what's really new is, in the last few months, we've kind of been sitting with the thought that Peace Valley is now going to be a woman's only space. So to honour that ancient and important space that this is, Auntie says it's called Butharum. And Butharum is Githable, and it means that this place is sacred to woman. And so for that reason, sort of as of this last week, in fact, we've made the decision to permanently keep this as a woman's only space. It's been kind of on the edge of it for the last, since January, since we realised what it was. Yeah, but now
that makes total sense. Yeah, it makes total sense, because I mean, I've visited your place as well, and it's kind of on a bit of a slope, and there's these rocks and this creek water running downhill, and then you've built this sort of spiral lavender in the round garden. So yeah, I can see.
Okay, so what's happening with people who invested and bought 2 acres? What's the story there? Are they getting chucked out? Are they?
No. It's just me. Just as one part of it. It's not the whole community. So just one part of it is a woman's space, not all of it. And that's another thing, back to the less spiritual side of it, but more to the environmental side of it. As part of that stepping away from the money system, I have arranged with Bindarabi, I'm not a shareholder, so this project that's here has a contract with the community. And so basically what that means is I don't own land, because I can't own land, because humans cannot own the earth owns us. And so by living, if I want to live that truly, I need to not own land. That includes not buying a share. So that's part of my trying to be as authentic as I can be to the values that I've got, while still being held in this system that's still, there. Yeah. I just thought I'd throw that in.
That's pretty huge. I mean, I think the original model was that people would get 2 hectares and they'd invest a certain amount and then build something, as long as they kept to the principles and were sustainable and community based, etc. So well done to the community for being flexible and able to embrace new paradigms. And that's what, Joy, that's what you're all about, and why we've invited you in, because it's not just about dreaming the new dream, which is our show, but also living the dream that you've got. So when I visited you, I was introduced to Joy's basically setting up what she calls the Peace Valley, and she's repurposed. She hasn't used anything. She hasn't bought anything to build her home. She's just basically repurposed things, and everyone was just sort of seeing how that was working. What was that like for you, to go into the bush, which is, very hot here, lots of ants, and very dry as well, and then to try and make a home and a camp there? How did you go about that? What was the easy bit and what was the hard bit?
Well, I don't know. I started out with a tent, and you saw the picture before. It was just as that cyclone. I think it was, I can't remember what it was called. And Debbie, that's right, Cyclone Debbie. And I was in a tent, and I'd been here about 2 weeks. So I nearly got flooded out. So that was quite exciting. I think what was hard was because I'd come from Europe. I'd lived in Europe for 30 years, and I didn't understand. I was a bit naive. I didn't understand how large Australia was, the distances between settlements, and I didn't understand the extremes of the weather, because I'd been living in a relatively mild European climate by comparison to Australia. So I came here naively thinking that there'd be a huge population, same as Europe, that there'd be loads of people come, and the wind blew my camp over, you see. That was after a year, or no, when was it? 2018. We got like a little whirly thing that came and picked up my camp, turned it upside down, and I had to start again. So that was quite exciting. And the yurt's at the back. I live in the yurt. Yeah, and it's all recycled, upcycled. The second build has taken a lot longer than the first build, because I didn't have quite the same energy to put to it. But I've got a big open plan area so that people can really experience being in nature, but yet be safe from the sun, and to feel at home. And yeah, it's all recycled, upcycled stuff. I got pallets from a local market that I got quite cheap, and then put them together. And yeah, there's some things I bought, but yeah, not like new, but not too much. Most of it's recycled. But again, it's still trying to live, and I'm sort of trying to not be too extreme, because like I went plastic free, as you know, for a year in Germany, and that was quite an adventure, because I did go cold turkey. As soon as I realized what was happening, that I had to stop using plastic, I just stopped using plastic. So that affected my diet, because I couldn't buy half the food I was needing, and that's why we did the food co-op. And then I started having to buy secondhand clothing, because almost all clothing is plastic. You know, when you start to look at the bigger picture, it's massive. So yeah, I had a year where at the end of the year I had not used any new plastic at all, and I had at the end of the year a rubbish bag that was just this full of things that I'd bought the year previously.
That's amazing. So let's talk about the plastic free, because we've got the food, you've covered that, the clothes, yeah, no polyester, so cotton. What about like banking and transport? I mean, you know, we use plastic all the time to pay.
Exactly. It's just madness, isn't it? It's everywhere. I couldn't believe that they were putting plastic into the money as well. It's like, hey guys, you're starting to use fracking and other really, really dodgy technologies that actually cost more to extract the stuff than it does to make a profit. They wouldn't be able to do it if they weren't getting money from governments to do it. And yet they're still putting the stuff into our money. It's like, why? Why? You know, it's madness. It's absolute madness. I did choose within that year of plastic free to keep using my computer and my telephone, because I knew, and to have lighting, because that's all plastic too, you know. But everything else, I just got it out of my life completely. And coming to Australia, I had to, this is where I was started from, I had to not be quite so strict with my ideals, because to get to the nearest really good farmers market, that's Mullumbimby. And for me, it's a 360 kilometre round drive. So I have to choose between the things that I can't grow myself, getting them nearby in Boona or Warwick, which is an hour's drive, roughly. Not quite an hour to Boona, a bit over an hour to Warwick. And tolerate some plastic. Or do this massive drive down to Mullum to get really beautiful organic farmers stuff, but use all that petrol and wear and tear on the car. So I've had to do a little bit of juggling, but my aim is to go back to being completely plastic free. So that means we're probably going to have a cow here at some point. A couple of the other community members, shareholders, also want a cow, so we'll have milk products on hand. We're growing our own vegetables. We've got a wonderful variety of fruits and unusual tropical and subtropical fruits. One of the members is very keen on these things and has been really, really busy planting lots and lots of orchards. And one of the great things of Bundarabi is we've got temperate, the possibility of growing temperate things, but also growing tropical things with some care. So we can actually, as we get more established, have food abundance the whole year round on this one piece of land, which is pretty awesome. It's to do with the heights. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I've had to do thinking about it is because of the drought, I had to protect the garden. And so I had to put shade cloth on the garden, which is more plastic, and it just really, it doesn't do me any good. Aha. Well, thanks, Jeff. So yeah, I run the project here on a gift economy basis, and again, that's the same. It's about the reciprocity, and it allows people to come and experience being in the bush and reconnecting to nature, even if they haven't got a huge bank account often retreats in the bush are things that only the well-to-do can afford, because they can run to quite big money. And I think it's really, really important that we open the space for everybody to reconnect to nature. So one of the things that I do here is we start our day with meditation and check-in, and I try to hold a kind of attitude of mindfulness here at Peace Valley, so that we're mindful of ourselves in terms of self-care, and then mindful of each other. So it's not about a work ethic, it's more about what is needed here. You know, some people come and they really need rest, so they rest. They want to just sleep for 2 or 3 days, they sleep for 2 or 3 days. And other people come and they really need to work, and they need to get out there with an axe and be chopping, you know, chopping wood or a saw, collecting firewood. So we really listen. That's important, this deep listening. I think beautiful elder Mary Rose, I can't remember her last name, sorry, disrespect there, talks of Dadiri, and Dadiri is so important, the deep listening, and it informs everything. If one can be in the space of deep listening, then everything can flow from that space. So that's the sort of one of the underlying principles. Yeah.
And I think that's you know, you had that moment when you sort of had the breakdown and then the breakthrough, and everything was clear, and you were just in that space where you just knew. And I think many of us spend so much time trying to do what is expected of us, or trying out things that we think will help. But if we just knew, and if we could just listen and learn to be present, then I think that will help everyone waste less time, actually, doing the stuff that's not so important, and focus on what's important.
Slowing down, because it's interesting, as we slow down, we become more productive. It's like a paradox. By being more present, everything has a tendency to flow, and action tends to be more right action rather than headless chicken stuff. I do plenty of headless chicken stuff. Quite a bit of it lately. Yeah.
I'm glad you're human.
Oh, totally. Totally.
But that actually is an interesting question, because you know, when I talk to Australians who've been to school with the first settlers and Indigenous, they kind of say that they're on a different kind of time to us Westerners, and when it comes to, you know, doing things together, it's a bit hard because they're on a different sort of time sensation. Do you find that, or do you find that you can grace that, you can bridge that quite easily because you've got that sort of deep listening and presence, patience?
I think it's growing in me, you know. I used to be, and I can still be, very busy. Like the last weeks we've been very, very busy working with preparing for a cultural burn here, and a lot of work. But in terms of the time, I'm getting better at being with and at the waiting for the time, for the right time. Auntie Gloria's got a beautiful thing that she said, it will be done right how did she word it exactly? It'll be done at the right time in the right way. And we just wait. We wait until it's the right time, and then it happens. It flows, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned fire sticks and fire law. Bindarabi obviously was also affected by the bushfires, so, you know, sort of you've had personal experience of the power of fire, bushfire down locally, and now working with the locals. Can you share some of that, your insights into that or experiences, please?
Yeah, certainly. Last year, just before Christmas, we had fires at 3 different sites, and 2 of them came to within just a few kilometres of Bindaraby, and it got quite scary. I actually packed up and left a couple of times. We weren't asked to leave, but the wind was predicted to come up, and it was looking really scary. So, and the smoke was huge, so I just left. And we'd had the 2 years of drought, obviously, so everything was tinder dry. And then we got the rain at Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, that stopped the fires, which was beautiful. So yes, I have experienced the bushfires, and it was sitting with that constant anxiety was pretty hard. Is it going to come? How fast is it coming? You know, maybe it's not going to come. The wind's going to go the other way, and we sat with that for 3 months. So it was quite a very difficult time. And so I'd actually got to know Auntie Carly through the Fire Sticks people. I went to Victor Steffenson's workshop up in Maryvale. In fact, my brother had him do a workshop on his property over in the Cambanora Gorge. So I got to hear him talk twice, and, actually 3 times thinking about it. And this photo here is Victor at front and young Rob at the back. And young Rob has been working with Victor, learning from him for about 10 years. And we just did a cultural burn here at Bindaraby, quite a large burn. And young Rob was, if you like, the conductor of the burn. He led it and held the space for it. We had assistants. Auntie Carly was here, and we had assistants from the Githable Rangers as well. And it was the most magical day, because the cultural burn, it's cool and you can walk with it. In fact, we did a smaller burn earlier with Auntie, and we were doing it, and we were in barefoot. It was a ceremonial burn, and so we were tending the fire barefoot, and it is perfectly safe to do that because it is cool. The minute the flame's gone, and the flame's usually only about this high, might get about this high, but it stays really low, and it just moves across the ground, clears the ground, and you can walk with it and walk onto the ground immediately afterwards. It's very beautiful to be part of. The bigger burn we just did with young Rob was a little bit more tricky, because it was an area that has not been burnt for a long, long time, and because of the drought, there's a lot of dead wood. So there was probably, in places, maybe 1/2 metre high of debris on the ground. So it did burn in places a little bit hotter than one would have liked. But from now on, it will be a true cool burn. Like, we've got rid of, and that's also made it safer. So if a bushfire comes through, we're going to be safe from that side, because there isn't the same debris there. Yeah, and all the wild food will come back, and the creatures are all there already. The birds are all back. The insects never went away. They just climbed up the trees and waited, and then came back down again. I mean, we didn't lose anything. A bit of sleepless nights watching the smouldering logs, but yeah.
So just for our international listeners, the idea of a cultural burn is that, you know, we generally get bushfires here in Australia when it gets really hot, like sort of over 30 degrees for, like, you know, 2 months at end. And in summer, then the fires basically just light themselves and it goes out of control. Whereas with the controlled burn or the cultural burn, the Indigenous peoples have had tradition of doing burns during winter when it's cooler, right? And to clear the land so that in summer it doesn't burn as much. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, it's a little bit of a slightly correct, but slightly not. So what I understand, and I've got a very small amount of knowledge, very small, is that the burning is not about hazard reduction. The burning is about healing country and healing the people that live on the country. And it's done totally holistic way. It's done about when a certain plant is in flower, when the wind is in a certain direction, when there's a certain humidity, and different types of country, whether it's ironbark country or whatever. sclerophyll, wet sclerophyll. Each type of country has a different time to be burned, and it's not related to the calendar. It's related to, which animals have got young, and it encompasses all of it, the weather,
Okay.
and it's part of it's white smoke. It makes a white smoke, which is like a healing smoke that goes right up into the canopy. So it takes away the sickness out of the trees, takes away the invasive weeds, and so then you get a healthy forest, and then so you increase your wildlife and you increase the native foods and the native grasses. So it's a totally holistic land management system that's been used for thousands of years. And the idea of hazard reduction is purely because since colonial times, the traditional method of farming the land has been stopped, and there's been a build-up of debris, and the forests have got sick. So we wouldn't be having fires.
The devastation of wildfires.
Yeah, I think Jeff's trying to get the video up. But thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I really didn't know that. I just thought it was hazard management. Sorry. So it's kind of got a transformative function. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh,
This goes to just over 2 minutes, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Victor Stevenson. I'm an Indigenous fire practitioner from North Queensland. It's a real shame to see the devastation of those wildfires across the Australian landscape. And it is time for people and communities to start listening to a new way to go back a step. And that is to tap into our Indigenous knowledge system that has managed this landscape for thousands of years. It is so important that people are not deprived from this knowledge system any longer, and that we are working with communities, black, white, to start looking after our landscape into the future. Because we can't afford to lose any more animals, to destroy the trees, destroy our environment, our waters. We must protect them for our children's future, and we owe it to them. Aboriginal fire management is very complex, and it's a lot of layers of knowledge and information. But it's all based on the really cool burn, which is low in intensity. Hot fires that we often see in the wildfires, and even hot fires we often see with hazard reduction burning, it's not good for the country. So the fire is an application to get rid of the weeds and the invasive grasses. We burn to promote the right vegetation, and that's what makes it different to hazard reduction.
When you burn it at the right time, grass come up everywhere. Look, I see.
Climate change is above us, and it's not all doom and gloom. We must look for positives, getting out on country, being practical, and starting to get the solutions happening today. If we start looking after the land with fire the right way today, then in generations to come, we may see beautiful big trees again. We might see the land clean and animals coming back. We may see a diversity of plants and healthy ecosystems. But that won't come with a lot of hard work and open-mindedness to revive this knowledge system and work together to look after our country.
There you go. All good?
All good.
Okay, so you mentioned that you twined with a Greek community, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Now, we got accepted for a small grant through the Global Eco-Village Network, and it's about twinning projects around the world. And so Coronacus Ark is a small project in Greece, and they're a little bit further along than I am, but we hold a lot of very, very similar values and ideas. And so what we're doing currently is we're kind of meeting weekly, and we're swapping some of the tools and things that we use. So Maria at Coronacus Ark, she's doing a lot with circle dance and song and music and art. as well as permaculture and a healthy land management stuff. And so we're kind of swapping some of these things, and I've given her some of the meditative practices that I use here. And in fact, tomorrow we're doing a very small joint event with some people in place here at Peace Valley and some people online, and Maria's going to lead. It's a full moon thing that we're doing. So Maria's coming in, she's going to lead song and dance. We're going to have a meal, and then we're going to do a full moon ceremony together. And so that's quite fun. It's been really valuable. And through the twinning, that little bit of money that we got, I've been able to get a professional Zoom account. So I'm offering quite a few things online now. Currently, there's a birdsong meditation that I'm doing on Thursday mornings. That people, it's just all gift, because everything I do is about giving and reciprocity. So I just offer that. And I'm also doing a honouring circle with a group of people from around the world that are based or have come out of the ULab with Otto Sharma. And so we just do this also once a week, and I'm now going to extend that. So the honouring circle is going to be open for the public as well, and at a time where Europeans can join us. And so that's about deep listening again. It's really about everything's about deep listening. Once we can listen deeply to ourselves and to Mother Earth and to all the other creatures, then I think we can move forward with right action. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds remarkable, and I love the quotes that you use about the peace and how important it is to develop peace within ourselves. And so I understand you're setting up the Peace Valley. So if people want to connect with you, you're saying you're doing the Zoom. We've got different links that Jeff's putting up here. But what is the best way for them to get in touch with you directly if they want to sort of volunteer or come and become a part of one of your groups, either with the working with the Women's Healing Group or the Peace Retreat or any of the other projects that you've mentioned today?
Okay. Either email, which is, or through Messenger, through Facebook Messenger through the page of Peace Valley. Email, which is also peacevalleyau@gmail.com, or through the website, there's a contact form there as well. So any of those will get to me. Phone is not a good way because I'm in the bush, I'm off grid, we have no phone reception here. So I do get calls only if I've got my Wi-Fi running through Wi-Fi calling. So I tend to tell people not to use the phone, to use email preferably, or Messenger. Yeah. And I welcome people. Like I say, now it's woman only, so I'll be welcoming women to come and stay as long as they want. They can come for a day or two or come for longer. I think the longest guest I've had so far was here for 3 months, just short of 3 months. A lot of people come for 1 week to a month. I think what people need really is to have more than a week, because they really need a week to recover, a week to realise that they need to come down and relax and recover a little bit, and then they can start to feel better. But it's completely open. And I just ask that people think about contributing in some way, because obviously there are still costs. Much as I'd love to be doing it without money at all, it doesn't quite work like that, because there are background costs, like this internet, for instance, and running the vehicle and so on. So I just ask if people would like to donate in terms of giving forward so that someone else can come. If they're well off, if they donate more than than others, so that they can sponsor somebody else coming. But if people haven't got money to donate and they want to be here, they are welcome to. I kind of suggest that people minimally cover the costs of their food, but anything is welcome. And I've had everything from, one lady gave me, she was really sweet, she gave me $300 for helping her plant some trees. And then I had another lady come and stay for several days, and her way of saying thank you was a jar of jam, which was really lovely. And that was really good for me, actually, because that really helped me truly embody that the gifting is truly you give with no expectation at all. Because as soon as there's an expectation, it's no longer gift. It's about barter, and then you suck straight back into the money thinking. Yeah, the power, the power dynamic starts to come in. So gift is good. Reciprocity.
Yeah, and I think it'd be a good way to practice going away from that sort of tied barter system or that tied payment or exchange system. Just to, I think the trust is what a lot of us haven't learned yet, to really deeply jump in and know that we can be provided for by the universe, and be that through other people or situations and landscapes. I guess the last question I want to ask you, back to the cockatoo, is, the animals, the totems. So have you got daily visitors? Have you got friends? Have you made friends with some of the birds or the animals in Peace Valley? Have they sort of accepted you as their neighbor now, as part of their family?
Oh, definitely. They're coming back after the drought as well. We did have dramatically reduced numbers of all the creatures, really. But now they're coming back. So I've got a lovely little family of wallabies. She gave birth to twins, and they keep coming back. So I would say they're my good friends. The twins are young adults now, and the glossy blacks come across quite regularly. I haven't seen the yellowtail cockatoos for a while, but I know they're there. I can hear them up in the forest. And we've got about 150 different bird varieties in this piece of land, apparently, in the Karela forest. So it really is a bird watcher's paradise. And we've got goannas, and we've got echidnas, and all sorts. Yep. And it's beautiful. It's paradise. I can't believe that I'm living in such a beautiful place. It's incredible. I'm very, very, very spoiled.
It's very special. Yep. Good to Jeff.
So the overarching is Birrabandi, which is where the communities come together, and they've all got their 2 acres, and they've all paid their $65,000. And then you've got the common area for camping and so forth. So each one of those are professional, or like Crystal Waters or at Findhorn, where people have come in and they've set themselves up to bring their knowledge, their wisdom, and their lifestyle to the community. So that's the overreaching aspect to it. So Peace Valley, just to not add any confusion, that's your project that's you've been allocated generous 2 acres or something to run your lifestyle. Am I on the same? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes and no. There's a wonderful German word, Jein, which means yes and no in one word. So Peace Valley is actually situated on the common land. So I don't sit on a block. So the blocks at Bundaraby have been pre-allocated in terms of position, and they have got building regs and fire regs, a planning permission all been done in advance. And so there's particular places that have, fire trails above and below, and water to the blocks and so on. So when people come in and buy a share, they choose one of these designated blocks.
Sure. So are you in the big open area where you go up towards the dam?
No, at the back of the campground.
Okay.
Heading back towards the gate from the campground, from the entry gate. Yeah, there's some white stones on the road, you might remember. It's just in land.
Jeff, because you're a man, you didn't find it because it's secret women's business, remember? You weren't drawn to it.
Mate, I went to a place up in Glasshouse Mountains, and they told me, I just drove in, and they said, what are you doing here? It's women's business. I said, no, I just felt intuitively I had to come here. Oh, is that right? Well, who's in the back of your car? Well, introduced him. So he said he was an Aborigine fella. And so the other lady said she was a New Zealand Maori. Oh, welcome onto the property. You can come. You're okay, fella. Just don't go anywhere near the birthing tree. Well, it's about 10,000 trees there. So I just had to stay where I was.
It's rooted.
It was good. They made us a cup of tea. It was really lovely. That was really great. And then they invited Daryl and myself and Glennis to come back a couple of weeks later for a women's, it was a Women's Day, eh? So they showed you how they make the bush tucker and how they do the herbs and medicines and stuff. It was really just impulsive, isn't it? It's just somehow or another, you intuitively, if you just let go of the handbook and just go on a little tiki-tour, it's quite surprising where you just turn up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also that, what I'm finding is that there is a sense in the Indigenous people I've met, they can sense immediately if one is authentic and coming from the heart. And so you will not be accepted in that manner if you're not, I don't know, I can't say a good person, but you know what I mean? There's an awareness of people that are really real and coming from a space of respect and love for country and for their fellow humans. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the most profound moment I had in my life was 4 years ago at Toowoomba, and I met Auntie Robin, and she does all Welcome to Country for the council and other organisations. And I said, "Would you like to go to dinner?" It was my shout, and so we're walking down Margaret Street, Ruthven Street, and then we turned around the corner to go to this restaurant, and these Japanese girls went past talking Japanese, and she stopped and had a look, and then shortly afterwards these 3 Indian students went past talking in their language, and again she stopped and listened. Anyway, then I was quite perplexed by it, but then I opened the door and I let her into this restaurant, and then we sat down, and then she got really tearful, yeah, and then she told me her story. His story was that they grew up on a rubbish tip up at Cloncurry, and being Aborigines, when they came to town, they weren't allowed to speak their language. So for her to walk down to Toowoomba and find these 2 groups of people coming through speaking Japanese and Hindi, and she wasn't allowed to speak her dialect of Aborigine. But the tears was that when she was a child, she ever thought that she'd be allowed into a restaurant, let alone sitting with a white man. That was bloody profound, eh?
Yeah.
That's bloody amazing. And so their house, was Dad used to go onto the tip and anything that was dumped, like tin and stuff, and so they lived in this corrugated, thing that Dad put together, and they found a bathtub, and so they were able to have a bath, but there's no running water. Yeah, really profound. There you go.
Very profound.
But just moving the subject along, money. So really, at the end of the day, this utopic position of living in this lifestyle where money's an effort to you.
Less important, but it still is important, sadly.
And then finding your husband getting so-called blood money, and think, oh my gosh. So that was pretty profound. But I have put my mind on this for many years to find out what would you replace what we've just currently got. And about 20 years ago, I read a series of books, and I got prompted to read them again. So I've actually gone and purchased them, and they arrived last week. And the answers to my question that I'm asking you is that I'm actually going to give you the answer, and that is these books were written about a group of 8 Americans who went into India, Nepal, Himalayas, went into Persia, went into China, and the books are called The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East.
Beautiful.
And it goes into some really great depth where these individuals have raised their energy and their vibration, and it's all done based on love and the fact that each and every one of them is the living Christ, and they're using the Christ energy and the principles behind it. So it's quite profound because they go on and they talk about John the Baptist and how Jesus was taught by these masters, and these 8 Americans are taught about and shown in real terms how you can walk across water, how to manifest food, how to levitate, how to teleport. And a situation occurred where they said, "Oh, we're going to have to get some money." And the guy just put his hand out. There's the money in his hand. And then the mother, and these individuals were over 150 years old. But when they said, "Oh, Mum's coming," Mum's 750 something years old. And so she manifests, and the light lights up this whole room where there's no electric light in the village. Her light, her presence, yeah. And then she just manifests this humongous big bowl, and she just says, "Yeah," and she gets these 2 light workers, if you want to call it such, to stand either side, and they just get these small eating bowls, and she just gets a ladle, pulls it in there, and gives them all this vegetable soup. And this guy goes over there looking in the bowl, and it's empty. But every time she goes and gets a ladle, it's filled with bloody highly nutritional vegetable soup. Now, you tell me, that seems to be where we've got to go.
Well, that sounds pretty wonderful. It would be, I would say that would be a great way to go. Absolutely.
And the key to it is to raise the vibration so that before you make the choice to pass, moving across into the other realm, you then transmute all your cells so that you bring the body with you. Yeah. And if you can do that, then it allows you then to manifest back into this reality. If you haven't got the gist of that doing that and you move out of your body, then you'll have to come back to go through the incarnation process to take that body, because once you slip out of the body, the only people who can see you is those people who've raised their vibration to see you. It's a bit like the Celestine prophecies, where there's a story involved in that, where they raise their vibration. So that's really essentially, I sense, to be both the question and answer, and that is to raise your vibration. And that's obviously eating the right foods that are highly vibrational.
Yeah, and I think there's yes, there's that sort of really spiritual, esoteric side to that, but there is also the physical side. If you're eating healthy food, you're going to have a healthy body, and if you're not eating meat of animals that have been killed in a horrible way, you're not going to absorb the energy of the fear of that creature into your body. So I can see that there's definitely a correlation there, and yeah, I know that since I've been a vegetarian, I have there's been a shift in my awareness, so that I'm aware of the animals and the plants and the trees as being part of my family, which I wasn't aware of before I was vegetarian. And I don't know whether there's a link there, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is. And another interesting thing that I'll just add as a little anecdote, if you like, is I've had 3 experiences where I've actually realized now, in hindsight, where I actually was watching the soul lift out of people's bodies just before they passed. The first one was a very good friend of mine in the UK many years ago, and it was about a month before she left. She had a really bad cancer, and she just glowed. She absolutely glowed, and I was like, "Wow, you're so beautiful! Wow, what have you done?" And the second time was a gentleman who was again a month before he passed, and and he glowed, but it was really specifically around his head. And it's like I sort of started to realize, oh my goodness, there's a correlation there. I wonder if. And then when another friend of mine who had a muscle wasting illness that went very quickly from getting the first symptoms to passing took a year. And when I saw her and I saw this ring of light around her head, I went, that's your soul as it's starting to leave your body, and you'll be gone within the next 4 weeks. And she was. So that was pretty incredible. Like, wow.
Mm.
So all of those pictures that we see, those Christian pictures of these people with these halos, that's their soul, potentially, from my experience. And it may be that their soul is bigger than their body, or it may be that they were not long before their time to pass. I don't know.
Yeah,
Very
Joy, in
interesting.
Qigong, they also, the acupuncturists and the Qi will tell you that the spirit sort of when it's about to leave your body, it leaves out through the head. So that's why we actually always want to ground, because if your spirit's like not really in the body anymore, that's it. You're going to be out of here pretty soon. Yeah.
Very good.
So, yeah, there we are.
Well, thank you, Joy, very much for joining us, and thank you to our audience for joining us. And I hope that, like us, you've been inspired by hearing about all the different adventures that Joy's been on, and the passion she's had on, and hopefully that's inspired each of us to do a bit more in terms of, becoming plastic free and disengaging ourselves from the system that's creating warfare on the earth, and come out to Australia, interact with us, and we welcome you with open arms. Thank you very much, Joy, for joining us on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I love sharing my stories. Hope you've enjoyed listening.
That's good. Yeah, single white female, you're having a crack at it. I think that's really important. You're a leader of inspiration for other women.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right. Next week.
So next week we switch over to men's business. Jeff's been saying, what about men? What about men?
Sacred men's business, yeah.
So we're switching over to a very male men's business. Cameron Monley will be our guest next week, and he has done the transition from, I understand, being a riot police squad member and leader to helping men develop their own soul connection and setting up a group called Infinite Connections. So we'll be talking to Cameron Monley next week on Thursday at the same time to find out more about his incredible journey too.
Okay.
So do join us again next week if you have time. And in the meantime, thank you very much and have a lovely week. And peace.